June 17, 1986.
Len Bias grew into a great All-American around whom Lefty built this year's Maryland basketball team. Len Bias.
The Boston Celtics had just won their 16th NBA championship.
Beautiful feed.
They were widely considered the greatest basketball team ever assembled. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, they had everything. And then, somehow, the rich got richer. With the second overall pick in the NBA draft, the Boston Celtics selected Len Bias.
The Boston Celtics select Len Bias of the University of Maryland.
This wasn't just a rookie. This was the chosen one. The man who was supposed to take the torch from Larry Bird and extend the Celtics dynasty for another decade. Red Auerbach, the Celtics' legendary architect, called it the happiest day of his life. 48 hours later, Len Bias was dead. There are tragedies in sports, and then there's this. A moment that didn't just break a family's heart, it broke a franchise, changed the league's drug policy forever, and robbed us of the greatest rivalry that never happened. This is the story of the 48 hours that killed the Celtics dynasty. To understand the weight of this loss, you have to understand the player. Len Bias was a physical anomaly. At 6'8", he was built like a tank but jumped like a trampoline. He had the pure jump shot of a guard and the power of a center, but he was more than just a collection of skills. In the Maryland area, specifically Prince George's County, he was looked at like he was a god. Walt Williams, who would later play in the NBA, grew up watching Bias. He called him the GOAT. He said Bias was the first person who made the NBA feel real for kids in that area. He was Superman, but he was their Superman. And when he got to the ACC, he didn't just play, he dominated. There is one specific game that scouts still whisper about. January 25th, 1986, Maryland versus Duke in the Dean Dome. Duke was the #1 team in the country. They were disciplined, defensive, and loaded with talent. And Len Bias single-handedly dismantled them. He scored 41 points. He wasn't just scoring either. He was dunking on their heads, hitting fadeaways, doing everything. Jay Bilas, who was playing for Duke that day, remembers huddling with his teammates during a timeout. He looked around and realized something terrifying. He later said, "We were in the huddle saying, we can't stop him, and there was nothing we could do." That was a Len Bias experience. He made great teams look helpless. But the real reason the Celtics wanted him, the reason Red Auerbach smiled that day, wasn't just about beating Duke, it was about beating Chicago. Len Bias didn't just compete with Michael Jordan, he battled him. January 12, 1984, Maryland versus North Carolina. Jordan entered that game as the reigning National Player of the Year, the Golden Child. But that night in Chapel Hill, Len Bias didn't care. Bias scored 24 points to Jordan's 21. And here's the thing. Bias kept it a 2-point game with 2 minutes left against a UNC team that was basically an NBA roster. Keith Gatlin, Bias' teammate, put it perfectly. He said, "People don't understand how good he was. People said he could have been as good as Jordan. I truly believe that." One scout famously told the Boston Globe, "He's the closest thing to Michael Jordan I've ever seen, but with a better jump shot." Think about that statement for a minute. In 1986, Michael Jordan was rising. The Celtics were aging. The plan was perfect. Bias would learn under Bird for a few years, and just as Jordan hit his peak in the early 90s, Bias would be there, ready to meet him. Magic versus Bird saved the NBA in the 80s. Jordan versus Bias was supposed to own the 90s. June 17th, draft night in New York City. Bias walks across the stage. He puts on that green Celtics hat. He smiles and tells reporters, "I'm just happy to be part of a winning tradition." The next day, June 18th, he flies to Boston. He signs a shoe deal with Reebok for $1.6 million. He meets with Celtics management. The country is at his feet. That evening, he flies back home to Maryland. He wants to celebrate with his college teammates one last time. He arrives at his dorm suite around 11 p.m. He leaves briefly to go to a gathering off campus, then returns to the dorm around 3 a.m. What happened next is a blur of poor decisions and catastrophic luck. Bias is hanging out with a few teammates and a longtime friend named Brian Tribble. Tribble was known around campus. He drove a Mercedes, he had money, he lived the good life. They're celebrating, laughing, living that specific moment of triumph where you feel immortal. And at some point, cocaine is brought out. Now, Len Bias was not known as a drug abuser. By all accounts, he was a kid who made a mistake on one of the biggest nights of his life. At 6:32 a.m., a frantic 911 call comes in from the dorm. It's Brian Tribble on the line. He says, "It's Len Bias. He's not breathing." The paramedics arrive. They find the future of the NBA unconscious on the floor. They try everything, from CPR to defibrillation, but his heart had already stopped. At 8:55 a.m., less than 2 days after being drafted, Len Bias was pronounced dead at Leland Memorial Hospital. The news hit the sports world like a nuclear bomb. Larry Bird was at his summer camp when he heard. His response was haunting. "It's the cruelest thing I've ever heard." Red Auerbach, the man who had seen everything in basketball, was broken. He had swindled the pick from Seattle specifically to get Bias. He thought he had secured the Celtics' future until the year 2000. Instead, the future died in a dorm room. The immediate fallout was legal and cultural. Brian Tribble was eventually indicted for possession with intent to distribute, though he was later acquitted. But the trial exposed a dark secret of 80s sports culture. Because of Len Bias, the NBA changed everything. The drug policies we see today, the strict testing, the zero-tolerance era, started right here. Len Bias saved a lot of careers because his death forced the league to clean up. But for the Celtics, it was a death sentence. Because Bias died, the Celtics had no youth injection. Larry Bird, who was already dealing with injuries, had to play massive minutes the next season to keep the team afloat. 2 years later, his back gave out completely. He played the rest of his career in agonizing pain. Kevin McHale played on a broken foot and was never the same. The team aged overnight, and then the ultimate cruelty. 7 years later, the Celtics' other young star, Reggie Lewis, collapsed during a playoff game and later died of a heart condition. 2 captains, 2 tragedies. The Boston Celtics, the proudest franchise in sports, would not win another championship for 22 years. Besides Len Bias' passing, the biggest pain isn't the trophies Boston lost. It's the basketball we lost. We were robbed of the rivalry between Len Bias and Michael Jordan. Imagine the 1990s. The Chicago Bulls are rising, but in the East, they don't just have to get past the bad boy Pistons. They have to get past a prime Len Bias. Does Jordan still win 6 rings if he has to go through a 6'8" athletic freak who can match him bucket for bucket? Maybe, or maybe not. Coach K, the legendary Duke coach, put it best. He said, "There were 2 players who stood out from everyone else in that era, Michael Jordan and Len Bias. Bias was the only one who could play with Michael. That is the ghost that haunts the NBA." We saw Jordan arguably become the GOAT. We saw the Bulls dynasty. But in a parallel universe, where Len Bias decides to just go to sleep that night, the 90s look very, very different. Len Bias never scored a point in the NBA. He never wore the jersey in a game. And yet, his absence is felt in every what-if conversation basketball fans have ever had. He is the Phantom of the Garden, the greatest player who never was. The man who proved that a dynasty can end in a heartbeat. Rest in peace, Len Bias. This is Court Chronicles. I'll see you in the next one.